I felt it before it happened. Not the fall, something before the fall. Something in the way Darius moved through that backyard. Too easy, too comfortable. The way a man moves through a space when he has already decided what belongs to him. I was at the far end of the long table, hands in my lap, watching. Children ran between the folding chairs. Somebody's gospel playlist floated out of a Bluetooth speaker. The Beaumont family reunion, third Saturday in July, same as always. I had been in this wheelchair for 14 months. I knew how to sit in it by now. I knew how to take up just enough space and no more. I watched Darius work the yard. Handshakes, backslaps, that wide, easy smile he keeps for other people's husbands. I watched him note where I was sitting. I watched him decide. He came up behind me the way you approach someone you are not afraid of, casual. One hand on the handle of my chair. His voice dropped into that playful register, the one that means he has an audience and he knows it. Then the ground came up to meet me. The concrete was cold through my dress. That is the detail that stays, not the impact, not the sound of the chair tipping, not the people who jumped back, the cold. Seeping through the fabric before I had even processed what happened. His voice came from somewhere above me. Loud enough for the table, loud enough for the people on both sides of it. Stop faking for attention. There was a burst of laughter from somewhere near the grill. Sharp, reflexive. Somebody muttered "damn" beneath their breath. One woman covered her mouth too late after laughing. Another looked away immediately. Not everyone laughed, but enough did. The particular laughter of people who have been given permission and only realized too late what they joined. Arvella was 3 feet away. I know because I looked for her first. She was looking at the tablecloth. My name is Lauren Crow. I am 67 years old. I ran a tailoring shop on Farish Street for 30 years. I raised a daughter. I buried a husband. I survived a stroke 14 months ago that rewired something in my left side and left me slower in ways that do not show on my face. I am not a woman who fakes anything. If you are watching this and you know someone who has been made to feel small by the people who were supposed to protect them, stay with me. Drop the time in the comments. I want to know who is here. Nobody moved toward me immediately. That is the part people like to rewrite afterward. They remember themselves kinder than they were. Mostly what happened was hesitation. People looking at each other first to see what version of the moment they were supposed to believe. Then one person moved. Dr. Ezra Caldwell. 2 tables back. 30 years of Sunday mornings at Calvary Baptist. My late husband's friend before he was ever my doctor. He did not rush. He walked to me the way a man walks when he has already decided what he is going to do and does not need to perform it. He crouched. He helped me up himself. Got me back in my chair with the kind of steadiness that does not announce itself. Then he stood, turned to face the table. Both tables. His voice was even, unhurried. I am Dr. Ezra Caldwell, this woman's treating neurologist. What happened here today was witnessed directly by me and will be documented accordingly. I would encourage everybody at this table to remember exactly what they saw before they decide later that it was something else. He did not raise his voice. He did not repeat himself. 12 seconds. The laughter was gone. The party continued. The music kept playing. People reached for their plates like the air pressure hadn't shifted. Like something hadn't just changed permanently. Before Dr. Caldwell returned to his table, he pressed something into my palm. His card. His voice dropped below the music. Call me Monday. Not as your doctor. As a witness. I looked down at my hands. These hands hemmed wedding dresses for 30 years. Repaired what was coming apart. Put things back together that other people had torn. I tucked his card into my bra. Across the yard, Darius was laughing with somebody's husband. Drink in his hand. Like nothing happened. The house was the same as I left it that morning. That was the strange part. Same kitchen table. Same low light over the sink. Same smell of the candle Luvania had lit when she let herself in with her key. Everything exactly where I put it. And me a completely different woman than the one who walked out the door. Luvania was across the table. She had made tea neither of us was drinking. That was fine. That was not what she came for. We were past the part where you cry. Both of us. We were in the part that comes after. Where you sit and you think, and you let the shape of a thing become clear. She said, "How long has he been doing it?" Not a question. She already knew it had been a while. She just needed me to say it, I told her. The comments that started maybe 8 months ago. Small ones, always in front of other people. Always as wrapped in concern. Mama's been forgetting things lately. Mama had a hard week. The suggestions about the house. Never a demand. Darius was too careful for demands. Just the persistent, patient pressure of a man who had decided on an outcome and was building toward it one conversation at a time. A smaller place would be easier for you. We just want what's best. Luvenia's jaw tightened. She did not interrupt. I told her about the mail. After the stroke, when I was relearning how to move through my own life, Darius had stepped in with the correspondence. Phone calls that needed following up. Certified letters that required a signature. Forms that needed to be sorted and filed. I let it happen the way you let things happen when your body is using all of its energy just to function, gradually, quietly. The way water finds its way into a foundation. I had not thought about it as a problem until I said it out loud. Luvenia went very still. How long? She said. About a year. She looked at her hands on the table. She did not say, I should have seen it. She did not say, why didn't you tell me? She just sat with it, the weight of having missed something that was happening right next to her. That guilt moved through the room without either of us naming it. I reached into my pocket and set Dr. Caldwell's card on the table between us. We both looked at it. I was not ready to pick up the phone. Not tonight. I just needed to see it outside of my body. Needed it to be real and flat and present on a surface I could look at without flinching. Luvenia said, he came for you. He did without being asked, She nodded once. That was enough. I am not an angry woman by nature. I have been mistaken for one. Women who speak plainly often are. But what I felt sitting in that kitchen was not anger. It was clarity. There is a difference. Anger is hot and directionless. Clarity is cold and very, very specific. I got up to look for a pen, opened the kitchen drawer, the one beside the stove where I keep the odds and ends. Pens, rubber bands, the spare key to the back door. There was an envelope at the back of the drawer I did not remember putting there. Certified mail notice. The kind that means something was sent and someone signed for it. The name on the signature line was not mine. I looked at the return address. A law office. One I did not recognize. I stood very still. I sat with the envelope on the table for 11 minutes before I opened it. I know because the clock on the microwave was the only thing I looked at. Not the envelope. Not my hands. Just the green numbers changing. Giving myself time to be ready for whatever was answered, and understanding somewhere underneath that I was never going to be ready. I opened it. It was not addressed to me, Darius Tate. Care of, and then my address, my house, my street. He had used my address on the intake form, his name, my address, as if the two of us were already one unit, as if the house was already his to receive mail at. The document was a consultation summary from an attorney named Whitfield. 4 pages, single-spaced. I read the first paragraph standing at the kitchen counter. Then I sat down and read all 4 pages twice. 14 months of my life, rewritten. My stroke was the opening argument. My wheelchair, evidence of total dependency, the word searching I sometimes do when I am tired. Normal, documented, something doctor. Caldwell flagged and explained to me 18 months ago, described in this document as cognitive deterioration, progressive, concerning. My management of my own household described in the past tense as something I used to be capable of. He had told the attorney I could not manage alone. He had said it with dates, with examples, with the particular confidence of a man who had been rehearsing. I called Dr. Caldwell at 9:15 that morning. He arrived at 2. He did not come as my doctor. He came in plain clothes with a folder under his arm. And he sat at my kitchen table the way he used to sit at my husband's kitchen table. Like a man who belongs in the room because he earned the right to be there. Luvenia sat beside me. Neither of us spoke while he opened the folder. He said, I want you to hear what 14 months of my records actually say. He walked us through it. Not clinical language, plain language. Intact decision-making capacity at every visit. Normal post-stroke adjustment. Mobility limitation documented as physical, not cognitive. Word retrieval delay noted, explained. Flagged as common and non-progressive. No evidence of deterioration. No basis for the conclusions in that consultation summary. He set Whitfield's document beside his own folder on the table. His medical narrative, he said, has no foundation. Not one line of it matches what I have on record. Luvenia said, then why does it sound so convincing? Because he built it carefully, over time. With an audience. Dr. Caldwell looked at me. The comments to family, the management of your correspondence, the reunion, all of it feeds the same narrative. He wasn't just preparing a legal case. He was preparing the people around you to believe it before he ever filed anything. The room was quiet for a moment. I looked at Whitfield's summary on my table. 4 pages built on months of quiet work. The comments dressed as concern, the mail management dressed as help, the pressure about the house dressed as love. He had not been managing my affairs. He had been building a record. Dr. Caldwell closed his folder. He looked at me the way my husband used to look at me when something required more than comfort, when it required action. Before you do anything else, he said, call Lenora Fitch. Lenora Fitch did not offer me coffee. She did not ask how I was doing. She looked at the documents I set on her desk, picked them up, read them in silence for 4 minutes, and then looked at me the way a surgeon looks at a scan. Not with feeling, with assessment. He's further along than most people are when they walk into my office, she said. That was how the conversation started. She laid it out without softening it. Mississippi Chancery Court handles guardianship. Under the Vulnerable Adults Act, any person can petition the court to be appointed guardian over someone they claim lacks capacity. Capacity meaning the ability to manage their own affairs, make medical decisions, handle finances, maintain their own welfare. The petitioner has to show the court enough evidence to justify a hearing. Not prove the case, not win it. Just present enough concern for the court to take a closer look. She set the Whitfield summary flat on the desk between us. A stroke, a wheelchair, 14 months of a son-in-law telling anyone who would listen that you're declining, and a family member willing to sign a corroborating statement. She paused. That gets him in the door, I said. What gets him back out? She almost smiled. Not quite. 3 things. And we build all 3 at the same time. She counted them on her fingers the way someone counts who has done this before and knows which details people forget under pressure. First, I file an APS report, Adult Protective Services, not about your capacity, about his conduct. The mail management, the financial pressure. The months of comments is designed to establish a narrative. That report doesn't automatically turn the court against him. But if APS opens a file while he's simultaneously petitioning for control over your affairs, the court pays attention to that timing. She lifted a second finger. Second, you execute a full set of legal documents in your own name. Power of attorney, healthcare procs, revocable trust. She was direct about what these do and do not do. They do not stop him from filing. What they do is active, competent, legally witnessed decision-making on the record during the exact period he's claiming you're incapable of doing those things. Judges notice contradictions. Third finger, a documented paper trail, every comment, every interaction, every witness who heard him describe you as declining, the consultation letter, everything from the reunion forward. Dr. Caldwell's documentation as the medical anchor, I said. How long do we have? She checked. He had already completed the attorney intake. She believed he was waiting on something, a financial assessment of the property, possibly a second family signature. She had seen this pattern before. Men who plan carefully do not file until they feel the ground is solid. 3 weeks, she said, possibly less. Mississippi Chancery can schedule an emergency or preliminary hearing fairly quickly once a petition is filed, especially if vulnerability is being alleged. Once the court calendar starts moving, it moves on its own timeline, not ours. She picked up her pen, and guardianship cases create pressure fast, even before a ruling. You don't have the luxury of waiting around to see what he does next. I had walked into that office knowing something was wrong. I walked in with a document and a name and a sense of what I was facing. Sitting across from Lenora Fitch, I understood for the first time the full shape of it, not just what Darius had done, what he had been building toward, the house, the finances, the slow, patient erasure of a woman who was still sitting right here, still thinking, still deciding, still present in every room of her own life. He had mistaken my stillness for weakness. Lenora looked up from her notes. He's close to filing. 3 weeks, possibly less. She set her pen down. We start tomorrow. I drove myself. I want to be clear about that, because people assume. They see the wheelchair folded in the back seat, and they assume someone brought me, dropped me off, waited outside. I have a modified vehicle. Hand controls on the steering column. Fitted 18 months ago, when it became clear that my left side and a standard pedal arrangement were not going to reach an agreement. I drive myself to the grocery store. I drive myself to church. I drove myself to Lenora Fitch's office 2 days ago. I drove myself to the Adult Protective Services Division of the Mississippi Department of Human Services on a Tuesday morning, and I parked in the closest to the door, and I went inside. The woman at the intake desk sent me to a Miss Terrell, third office on the left. I had her read within 2 minutes. Not because she was easy to read, but because I have spent 67 years learning people. She was careful, thorough, the kind of woman who writes everything down, not because she has to, but because she understands that details are the difference between a case that holds and a case that dissolves. I filed the report on Darius Tate. I was specific, sequential. I started 14 months ago and I moved forward without skipping anything. The mail management, how it began, how it expanded, what categories of correspondence he had absorbed into his control. The comments about my memory, delivered in front of witnesses who did not know they were being recruited. The pressure about the house, never a demand, always a concern, always framed as love. The consultation summary I received at my own address, addressed to him. Miss Terrell wrote steadily through all of it. Her pen did not stop. Then I mentioned the reunion. I described the incident, the wheelchair, the fall, the words he said loud enough for 2 tables to hear. I told her a witness intervened immediately, that the witness was my treating neurologist, present at the event, and that he had already documented the incident in my medical record. Miss Terrell's pen slowed. She looked up. "Can you give me his full name and hospital affiliation?" It was not a question. She was already writing again before I finished saying it. Then she explained something carefully. Not to reassure me, but because she wanted me to understand the process correctly. APS would still have to review the file formally. Intake did not mean conclusions. Most investigations took time, especially with the backlog they were carrying. But documented medical observations from a treating neurologist could move a supervisor to prioritize review more quickly, particularly when a guardianship issue might already be developing alongside possible exploitation of a disabled adult. I appreciated that she said it plainly. People trust systems more when someone tells them what the system actually is. I knew what that meant. A neurologist's documentation does not sit in a file the way a family member's statement sits in a file. It has a different weight. She knew it. Now I knew she knew it. Before I left, Terrell handed me a case number written across the top of a yellow form. "This means your complaint has officially entered intake review," she said. "Not that findings have been made. I understand." She nodded once like a woman who did not often hear those words in that office. I drove home. Luvania was in my kitchen when I got back. She had let herself in, made a pot of coffee, and was sitting at the table with the particular stillness of a woman who has been praying and trying not to show it. I told her it was done. She nodded and poured me a cup without asking. My phone rang at 7:14 that evening. Arvella. Her voice was careful in a way that did not belong to her. The careful of someone who had been told what to say and was trying to make it sound natural. She asked if I was doing okay, if I needed anything from the store, if I had been resting the way the doctor recommended. The word choices were Darius's. I could hear him in the pauses. I told her I slept well, that I had eaten a good lunch, that I was taking it easy, warm, light, surface, nothing she could carry back to him that meant anything at all. When I hung up, Luvania looked at me across the table. "She know what he's doing?" I set the phone down. "Not yet." The notary arrived at 9. Lenora had arranged everything, 2 witnesses, a notary, the documents printed and tabbed and waiting. They sat at my kitchen table with their folders and their stamps and their professional calm, and I signed my name to my own life. Power of attorney. Healthcare proxy. Revocable trust. I had owned this house for 22 years, paid it off in 18. My name was already on the deed, on the utilities, on every piece of paper that mattered. But there is something different about signing documents that say, in the specific witnessed, legally binding language of the state of Mississippi, that I am competent, present, and in full control of my own decisions. Something that feels less like paperwork and more like a statement. I signed everything. The notary stamped. The witnesses initialed. It took 31 minutes. When they left, I sat at the table alone for a moment. The house was quiet. The documents were in a folder Lenora's office would file before noon. Lenora called at 11:15. She told me APS had formally assigned the intake file for review that morning. Not a full finding, not a conclusion, but enough for an investigator to begin preliminary contact because the complaint involved possible exploitation alongside an anticipated guardianship dispute. She said the investigator had reached out to Darius for an initial statement. Then she said, he handled the call. But something moved. My contact at the office said his tone shifted partway through. He started answering questions he hadn't been asked yet. I knew what that meant. A careful man who starts volunteering information is a man who felt the ground move and is trying to stabilize it. He had assumed I was too overwhelmed to file, too isolated, too focused on recovery to know that option existed. He had been wrong about that. Arvella called that afternoon. I almost did not answer. But I did, because the way a person sounds when something has happened in their house is different from the way they sound on a routine call. And I wanted to know which version of Arvella I was going to get. Her voice was careful in a different way than it had been the night before. The previous call had been coached. I could hear Darius's word choices sitting inside her sentences. This call was quieter, like she was choosing her own words and finding them harder to locate than usual. She asked if I had spoken to anyone lately. About legal matters. I told her I had been resting. A pause. Longer than it needed to be. Then, softly, Darius said somebody from the state called him. There it was. Not accusation, not defense either. Just information laid carefully between us to see what shape it made. I kept my voice even. Did he say why? Another pause. He said people are misunderstanding things. People, not we. I noticed that. She said, okay, Mama, I just wanted to check on you. She hung up before I could respond. I sat with the phone in my hand. Something had happened in that house. I did not know the full shape of it yet. But Arvella's voice had a texture in it I had not heard before. Not the coach concern of the previous night. Something rawer. Something unsettled. Like a woman hearing the first hairline crack in a version of her life she had been standing inside for years. I was still thinking about that when Lenora's assistant called at 4:47. Her voice was even, professional, the kind of even that people use when the news is not good and they have learned not to deliver it with feeling. Miss Crow, Mr. Tate filed the guardianship petition this afternoon. I said nothing. 2 days earlier than we projected. I heard the knock and I already knew. Not because I was expecting it at that hour. I wasn't. But there is a particular kind of knock that does not belong to someone you know. No rhythm to it. No familiarity. Just 3 deliberate sounds against a door from someone doing a job. I opened it. A man in a plain shirt holding a brown envelope asked if I was Lauren Crow. I said I was. He held out the envelope. I took it. He said I had been served and walked back to his car without looking at me again. I closed the door. I did not open the envelope at the door. I carried it to the kitchen table, sat down, and set it flat in front of me for a moment. Then I opened it. 31 pages. Darius's attorney, Whitfield, had built it carefully. I had expected that. What I had not expected was how reasonable it would sound. That was the most unsettling thing. Not the accusations, the reasonableness. The way my stroke was presented, not as a crisis but as a beginning. The start of a decline. 14 months of normal post-stroke adjustment reframed. Page by page, as a woman losing her grip on her own life. My wheelchair, evidence of total physical dependency. My word searching, cognitive deterioration, progressive and documented. My reliance on family for correspondence management, proof that I could no longer handle my own affairs. Every true thing twisted just enough to point in the wrong direction. The reunion appeared on page 9. One line. Subject exhibited emotional dysregulation in a public setting, requiring intervention by family members. No names, no witnesses. No mention of a neurologist who stood up and spoke 12 words that stopped a yard full of people cold. Just one careful sentence that turned what happened into something I caused. Whitfield had left Dr. Caldwell out entirely. I noted that. I kept reading. Page 19 was the corroborating affidavit. A support statement from a family member, attesting to the claims in the petition, confirming the narrative, providing the second voice a chancery court needs to schedule a hearing. I read the name at the bottom. Arvella Renee Tate. Her signature, her handwriting. I know it the way you know something you watch develop. The looping A, the way she crosses her T low. I set the page down. I picked it up and read it again. The affidavit described me the way a stranger would describe someone they had been told about. Clinical, distant, assembled from secondhand observations. She had written that I struggled to manage daily tasks, that she had concerns about my safety living alone, that she supported the petition out of love and concern for my welfare. Out of love. I set it down again. I sat at that table for 40 minutes. I read the petition 3 times, not because I needed to understand it better. I understood it the first time. I read it because I needed to know every word of it, every choice his attorney made, every omission, every place where the truth had been bent instead of broken, because bent is harder to argue against. I was still reading when Luvenia let herself in. She stopped in the doorway when she saw me. She did not speak. She looked at the pages spread across the table, and then she looked at my face, and something in her expression shifted. She crossed the room and pulled out the chair across from mine. I looked up at her. She signed it. Lenora spread the documents across her conference table and walked me through every page. Everything was filed. Everything was on record. The power of attorney, the health care property, the revocable trust, notarized, witnessed, submitted to the Chancery Court clerk as part of my response to the petition. Lenora had added a cover filing that summarized my legal activity over the past 2 weeks. Competent, sequential, self-directed decisions made by a woman who drove herself to an APS office and an attorney's office, and a notary appointment without assistance. She tapped the stack when she finished. "This doesn't stop him from having his day in court," she said. "But it means his day in court is going to be very expensive for him." I drove home. What I did not know, what I would only learn later, after everything had moved and settled, was what was happening across town while I was sitting in Lenora's office. Arvella was in Darius's home office looking for an insurance form. Something routine, the kind of errand that takes 2 in a house you have lived in for years. She knew where he kept the household files. She went to the cabinet, opened the right drawer, and found a folder she had not seen before. She told me later that she almost closed it immediately, that her hand was already moving to slide it back into the drawer when something made her stop. The way it was positioned, maybe. Or the way her own mother's address was printed across the top of the first page. Not handwritten, not a note. Typed, formatted. The way a business address appears on a transaction document. She opened it. Inside, financial projections on my house, sale estimates based on current Jackson market values, renovation cost assessments, what it would take to update the kitchen, the bathroom, the floors, a timeline, my address at the top of every page like a header, like a property listing that had not gone public yet. She read the first 2 pages, then she closed the folder. That part mattered, because even then, she was still trying to fit what she saw into the version of Darius she understood. She told herself maybe he was only preparing for possibilities. Maybe legal planning always looked colder on paper than it sounded out loud. Maybe this was responsible. Maybe this was protection written in a language she did not recognize. Then she opened the folder again. This time she noticed attached to projected sale windows. The renovation estimates scheduled after anticipated occupancy transfer. The notes in Darius's handwriting beside projected market values, not if when. And underneath one projected sale estimate, a handwritten line circled twice. Temporary condo for Ellen transition support. L, not Lauren, not Mama, not your mother, just a letter. That was the part she could not explain away afterward. She took out her phone and photographed every page in that folder before she closed it and put it back exactly where she found it. Every page. She told me she was very calm while she did it, that her hands did not shake, that she was not thinking about what it meant yet. She was just making sure she had it. The way you secure something before you allow yourself to feel it. She went to make dinner. Darius came home an hour later. She was warm, unremarkable. She asked about his day and listened to his answer and passed him the bread and refilled his glass. She told me later that she watched him across that table, like she was seeing the walls of the room for the first time. Noticing things she had stopped noticing years ago. The way he spoke about my house in the abstract. The way he used the word situation when he meant asset. The way he talked about managing everything without once mentioning where I wanted to live. The way his concern for me had a shape to it. A destination. She had signed her name to his affidavit 6 days ago, believing she was protecting me. Sitting across from him at their dinner table, she understood for the first time that she had not actually been participating in a family decision. She had been participating in a plan. She did not say anything. She finished dinner. She washed the dishes. She went to bed. The next morning she told him she had a hair appointment. She did not go to a hair appointment. I saw her through the side window before she knocked. She was standing on my porch with her hands at her sides, and no purse, just her keys and her phone, and the particular stillness of someone who has driven somewhere and is now deciding whether to go through with it. She did not know I was watching. She stood there for a moment longer than a person stands when they are sure about something. Then she knocked. I opened the door. She said she was in the neighborhood, that she wanted to check on me. Her voice had the careful quality of someone who had prepared what to say and was hoping it would be enough to get through the door. I looked at her for a moment. Then I opened the door wider. She came in. She sat on the couch the way she used to sit on it when she was a teenager, slightly forward, like she had not yet decided how long she was staying. I sat across from her, and we talked the way two people talk when there is too much between them to say any of it directly. How was I feeling? Was I sleeping? Did I need anything from the store? Had I been to my last appointment? Surface. Careful. The conversation of a woman trying to hold something together without showing the seams. I answered everything. I got up to get my own water from the kitchen. I found my reading glasses on the counter where I had left them. I came back, settled back into my chair, picked up where we had left off. I did not perform any of it. I did not make it obvious. I just lived in my house the way I live in my house. Unhurried, independent, navigating my own space with the competence of a woman who has been doing it alone for 14 months. Arvella watched. Not obviously. She was not staring. But I have known my daughter's face for 39 years, and I know what it looks like when something is moving behind her eyes. There was a moment, about an hour in, when I stood up to adjust the window blind and then came back and picked up my water glass without missing a beat, when something in her face shifted and then went still. The way a face goes still when something you have believed for a long time turns out to have been wrong. She did not say anything about it. She did not apologize. She did not mention the petition or Darius or the affidavit with her name on it. She did not explain why she came. She stayed 2 hours. Then she said she should get going. She stood, picked up her keys, and walked to the door. She paused with her hand on the frame. She said, "I'll call you this week, Mama." I said, "Okay, baby." She left. I sat in the quiet for a few minutes. Then Lavinia came through the back. She had been in the kitchen giving us space, the way she always knows to. She sat down across from me in the chair Arvella had just left. She said, "She's starting to see it?" I picked up my water glass because she came alone. Lavinia nodded slowly. My phone rang. Lenora. The preliminary hearing was scheduled, 14 days out. Darius's attorney had filed 2 additional declarations that afternoon. New statements, new claims, pushing harder. She needed Dr. Caldwell's complete documentation formally entered as evidence before the hearing date. "We have 10 days, she said, not 14. 10. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. I do not know what I had pictured. Something larger, maybe. Something that matched the size of what was at stake. But Mississippi Chancery is not a room built for drama. It is a room built for paperwork, wood paneling, fluorescent light, a judge's bench that is elevated just enough to remind you of the arrangement. I sat beside Lenora and I folded my hands in my lap and I listened to Whitfield describe my life. He was good at it, I will say that. He had organized 14 months of my existence into a narrative that moved in one direction, downward. The stroke as the opening event, the wheelchair as the evidence of what followed. My word searching presented as deterioration, progressive and documented. My reliance on family for household correspondence management, presented as proof that I could no longer manage my own affairs. He spoke about me in the third person, the way people speak about someone who is not present, even though I was sitting 8 feet away. It sounded almost reasonable. That was the most carefully constructed part of it, not the facts, the tone. The practiced, sorrowful tone of a man presenting a tragedy he did not cause. I sat still and let him finish. Then Lenora stood up. She entered Dr. Caldwell's records first. 14 months of neurological documentation. Every functional assessment, every cognitive evaluation, every clinical visit since the stroke. She did not editorialize. She let the records speak in the language they were written in. No cognitive decline at any visit. Normal post-stroke adjustment. Documented and explained. Full decision-making capacity, noted consistently across every appointment. Then she entered the reunion notation. Dr. Caldwell's clinical record of what he witnessed, precise, time-stamped, Entered into my file the same evening. Witnessed incident involving subject's wheelchair, initiated by third party. Subject responsive, oriented, communicative throughout. No evidence of cognitive or emotional dysregulation. Incident documented at subject's request. Whitfield had called it emotional dysregulation. Dr. Caldwell had been in the room. Lenora entered my execute legal documents next. Power of attorney, healthcare proxy, revocable trust, all completed and filed in the same period. Darius's petition claimed I was incapable of managing my own affairs. Active, witnessed, notarized legal planning conducted by the woman he was describing as incapacitated. Then she placed the consultation summary letter on the record. Darius' intake document from Whitfield's office, addressed to him at my home address, received by me, outlining a legal and financial strategy built around my property. Sale, control, timeline. The judge read it without expression. Then she looked up. Her first questions were careful, narrow. The kind judges ask when they are still testing the structure of something, before deciding whether it can hold weight. She asked about the financial projections referenced in the consultation summary. Who had prepared them? When? At whose direction? Whitfield answered, but not cleanly. The judge made a note. Her next question was about the address on the intake form. Why Darius had used my residence as his mailing address in legal planning documents connected to the proposed guardianship. Whitfield requested an opportunity to supplement the record later if necessary. Another note from the judge. Then she looked directly at Darius for the first time. Not hostile, not emotional, just attentive in a way that made the room feel suddenly smaller. She asked when discussions about selling my home first began. Darius answered in a voice that was still controlled, but something behind his eyes had moved. The judge did not rule. She did not signal anything dramatic. She stated only that the court had unresolved concerns regarding the factual basis for the petition and wanted additional review of the financial documentation before proceeding further. Then she recessed. In the hallway, Darius walked past me without speaking, without looking, the deliberate non-look of a man who cannot afford what his face might do. His attorney caught Lenora before she reached me. They spoke for less than a minute. Low voices, professional expressions, the kind of conversation lawyers have when one of them suddenly understands the risk has changed shape. Then Lenora came and stood beside me. He wants to discuss a possible voluntary withdrawal. I waited. He's blinking, she said quietly. That means he understands the court is paying attention now. She paused. But the judge hasn't decided anything yet, not officially. Another pause. Tell him no. Arvella told me later what happened that evening. I wanted to be precise about what she said and how she said it, because the details mattered, not just to me, to what came next. Darius came home from the hearing the way a man comes home when he has decided the problem is not him, jacket still on, phone in his hand. The particular energy of someone who has already moved past what happened and is planning what to do about it. He called his attorney from the kitchen, while Arvella was in the next room. She could hear his half of the conversation through the wall. Challenge Caldwell's impartiality. He was a family friend, not an objective physician. Question the legal documents. Coerced, rushed, prepared under duress. Find other family members willing to file supplemental declarations. Push harder. He had always been able to create enough noise to move a room. He believed this room was no different. He came in and set his phone on the counter. He was quiet at first. That was always how it started. The quiet that was not calm but contained. She had learned the difference years ago. Calm has a softness to it. His quiet had edges. Then he started talking. He said her mother was making everything harder than it needed to be. That the house had been sitting there losing value while they waited for her to come around. That he had been patient. That word, patient, like patience, was as if he had spent on her mother and was owed back. He said he had been doing this for their benefit. Building something. Planning ahead. He said the word there, and Arvella heard the word underneath it. She had heard versions of this before. Smaller. Better packaged. Dressed in concern, or logic, or love, depending on what the moment required. Darius was skilled at packaging. She had always understood this somewhere. She did not look directly. But she had photographed that folder. She knew what the timeline said. She knew what her mother's address looked like, printed at the top of a transaction document. She knew the difference between a man who was protecting his wife's mother and a man who had identified an asset and built a strategy around acquiring it. She sat across from him, and she felt something move through her that she recognized. The sensation of being managed. Of being a variable in a plan she had not been consulted on. Of saying yes to things because the framing made yes feel like love. She had felt it before, in smaller doses, at lower temperatures, packaged well enough that she could explain it away. Tonight, there was no packaging left. He had used it all up in that courtroom hallway. She thought about her mother sitting at a kitchen's table, reading a petition with her own daughter's signature on it. She thought about 14 months of Lauren navigating this same sensation. The slow, patient pressure of a man rearranging the world around a woman and calling it care. She had watched her mother carry it with a dignity she did not fully understand until right now. She did not say anything to Darius. She let him finish. She nodded in the places that required nodding. She waited until he moved to the other room. Then she picked up her phone. She called me. It rang 4 times, I answered. She said, "Mama, I need to tell you something." She started talking before I could say anything. Not rushed, deliberate. Like she had been holding it in a specific shape and needed to release it in that same shape before it changed. She told me about the folder, the financial projections on my house, sale estimates, renovation assessments, a timeline, my address printed at the top of the first page the way a business address appears on a contract. Not a home, not a mother's house. A line item. I did not interrupt. She said she had photographed every page before she put the folder back. She said her hands were steady when she did it. She said she did not let herself feel it until after. Then her voice changed slightly, quieter. She admitted that the first night she found the folder, she had tried to explain it away. Told herself maybe Darius was only preparing options in case my condition got worse. Told herself maybe financial planning always looks cold on paper. She said she went to sleep that night, trying to make the documents fit the version of her husband she understood. "But then I kept hearing him talk about your house," she said softly. "Not you, the house." Let her finish. The silence that followed was long, not uncomfortable, necessary. The kind of silence that has weight and deserves to be held for a moment before anyone moves through it. Then I said, "I know you signed that petition." She said, "I know." Another silence, shorter this time. We were both still on the line. I could hear her breathing, the particular quiet of someone waiting to be told what comes next. Then she spoke again before I could. "I kept telling myself he was trying to help," she said. "Even after the hearing, even after I saw the folder. I kept trying to make it smaller in my head than it was. There it was, not just guilt." The sound of a woman realizing how long she had been translating someone else's behavior into something easier to survive. I said, "I don't need an apology from you, Arvella. I need a decision. You decide which side of this you're standing on, and then you stand there." She did not say anything for a moment. Then she said, "Okay, Mama." Not a performance, not a tearful declaration. Just 2 words from a woman who had finally stopped negotiating with what she already knew. I hung up and sat in the dark for a while. The next morning, Arvella called Lenora Fitch's office. Lenora told me about it that afternoon. That Arvella had called at 8:45, identified herself, and asked what she needed to do to formally withdraw her name as a supporting witness on the petition. Lenora explained the process. A sworn affidavit of withdrawal, a statement of what she had personally observed. Signatures, notarization, filing with the court. Arvella listened to all of it. Then she asked what filing the affidavit would mean legally if Darius contested it later. Lenora explained that once filed under oath, it became part of the court record permanently. There was a pause after that. Then Arvella said, "Okay, I can do that, and I have photographs." Lenora said there was a pause on her end of the line when she heard that. The kind of pause that means something just shifted significantly. That evening, I told Luvania. She sat across from me at the kitchen table and listened to all of it without interrupting. The call, what Arvella said, what I said back, the photographs, the withdrawal affidavit. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, "You trust it?" I thought about that. Not the answer, I already knew the answer. I was thinking about how to say it accurately. "I trust that she finally saw what I've been living in," I said. "Whether that's enough, we'll find out." Luvenia nodded once. She did not push further. That was what I needed. Not reassurance, analysis, just someone to hold the weight of it with me while I decided how I felt. My phone rang. Lenora. She did not open with pleasantries. She told me Arvella's withdrawal affidavit had been filed and accepted. She told me the photographs had been submitted as supporting documentation. She told me the final hearing was in 6 days. The petition has no corroborating witness, she said, and a financial motive is now formally on the record. A beat. He can still show up, Lenora said, but he can't win. The courtroom had a different quality that morning, not louder, quieter. The kind of quiet that settles over a room when one side of an argument has already been decided and everyone present can feel it, but no one has said so yet. I sat beside Lenora. I folded my hands in my lap. I had been in this room before, 2 weeks ago, watching the judge's questions shift from my capacity to Darius's purpose. I knew what this room felt like when it was turning. This morning, it was not turning. It had already turned. I was here to watch the conclusion of something that had nearly concluded itself. Whitfield presented what he had left. It was not much. The medical narrative he had built the petition on had no evidentiary support. Dr. Caldwell's records had dismantled it at the preliminary hearing, and nothing substantial had replaced them. The corroborating witness, whose signature had anchored the affidavit, had withdrawn that signature under oath and submitted a statement of her own observations. The attorney who had advised Darius privately to withdraw and been overruled was now standing at the petitioner's table with the particular composure of a man doing his professional duty while knowing exactly how this ends. Whitfield made his argument. I listened to it the way you listen to something that no longer has power over you, present, attentive, unmoved. Then Lenora stood. She entered Dr. Caldwell's complete neurological record. 14 months, every visit, every assessment, every notation, including the reunion. She entered the executed legal documents. She entered documentation confirming APS had opened a formal review into allegations of possible financial exploitation connected to the petition. Not conclusions, not final findings, just the existence of an active state review already underway, alongside the guardianship filing. She entered the consultation letter. She entered Arvella's sworn withdrawal statement. Then she entered the photographs, Darius's own documents, his own number, his own timeline, his own handwriting on the tabs of the folder, entered into evidence by his wife. The judge reviewed the submission without expression. Then she looked at Whitfield and asked one question about the financial projections. Who had commissioned them? When? In relation to what event? Whitfield gave an answer. It was technically accurate and completely unhelpful to his client. The judge looked at her papers for a moment. Then she spoke. The petition lacked sufficient evidentiary foundation. The medical claims were directly contradicted by the treating physician's documented record. The financial documentation introduced raised substantial concerns regarding the petitioner's motives and the intended disposition of the subject's property. The court found insufficient basis to continue the guardianship action as filed. Petition dismissed. Costs awarded against the petitioner. Procedural. Precise. Careful enough to survive appeal. I looked at my hands in my lap while she spoke. These hands. The same hands that were folded in this same position when I was lying on the ground at a backyard reunion 14 months and one careful plan ago. They were steady now. They had always been steady. The room had just taken this long to see it. Outside the courthouse, the July air was thick and still. I saw Darius across the parking lot before he saw me. When he turned and found me looking, he held it for a moment. Not defiance, not apology. Something emptied out. Then he got in his car and drove away without speaking. I watched until he was gone. Lenora came to stand beside me. It's done. I nodded. I didn't say anything. I just started moving toward my car. Jackson does not need a press release. It has Luvenia's phone. It has the beauty shop on Farish Street. It has the particular speed of a community that has known itself for generations, where information does not travel so much as it surfaces, the way water finds its level, until everyone has the shape of a thing, even if they don't have all the details. The reunion, the doctor who stood up, the petition, the hearing, the dismissal and cost award. Not everyone got it exactly right, but everyone got the shape of it. And in Jackson, the shape is usually enough. 3 weeks after the hearing, I was in the third row at Calvary Baptist when Reverend Titus Greer stood at the pulpit and delivered a sermon that mentioned no names. He did not need to. He spoke about communities that confuse cruelty for entertainment, about what it means when a room full of people laughs at a woman on the ground, what that laughter costs the room, not just the woman. about debts that accrue in public and come due in the same place they were made. His voice was even, pastoral, the kind of voice that has learned to carry weight without straining. Several people who had been at the Beaumont reunion were in those pews. I did not look at them. I looked straight ahead at the cross above the altar, and I let his words do what words do in a room full of people who already know what they are about. After the service, some of them reached out. Brief messages. Careful apologies assembled from the parts of what happened that were easiest to understand. A few phone calls. I was gracious with all of them, thanked them, acknowledged what they said, moved on. They were not the story anymore. They were the perimeter of it. Not everybody apologized. One woman from the reunion stopped me outside the fellowship hall and said she still believed the situation had gotten too complicated for outsiders to judge. Another told Lavinia she thought families should handle things privately, no matter what happened inside them. There were people who had watched Darius lose in court and still preferred the comfort of ambiguity over the discomfort of admitting they laughed at the wrong moment. That felt honest, too. Communities do not correct themselves all at once. They shift unevenly. Some people reckon, some retreat, some simply get quieter. Lavinia did not answer 2 of the calls. I did not ask her to. That same week, I called a contractor about the shop. My mother's tailoring shop had been sitting on the corner of Farish Street for 3 years. Closed, since before my stroke, the windows papered, the door locked with the same padlock my mother put on it when her hands gave out. I had driven past it 100 times since the stroke and thought about it the way you think about something you are not ready to think about directly. I called and asked questions. What the floors would need, what updating the wiring would cost, what it would take to make it a working space again. The contractor was straightforward. It was not cheap. It was not impossible. He said 4 months if I decided to move forward. I thanked him and told him I would be in touch. I had not decided anything. I was just asking what was possible. After 14 months of defending what I already had, asking what else might be possible felt like something new. Something that belonged to the other side of all of this. Arvella came to church that Sunday for the first time in months. She sat 3 rows behind me. I knew she was there before I turned around. I felt the particular weight of her presence, the way you feel someone you made sitting in a room with you. She did not approach me before the service. She did not try to catch my eye during it. She just sat there and let the service be the service. Afterward, the congregation moved toward the doors. I made my way up the aisle in my chair, past the familiar faces, the familiar hands on my shoulder, the familiar warmth of a community that had been trying in its imperfect way to reckon with itself. Near the side door, I saw her. She was standing just inside the frame, not blocking the way, not demanding anything, just present. Her hands at her sides, waiting without requiring. Our eyes met. I kept moving. Then I stopped. I turned around. The light came through the kitchen window, the way it does on Tuesday mornings in July. Low and unhurried, settling across the table like it had nowhere else to be. I sat with my hands flat on the surface in front of me. These hands. I have been looking at them differently since the stroke, noticing things I used to take for granted. The way the left one moves a half second slower than it used to. The way I have to think about what I once did without thinking. 30 years of threading needles, hemming dresses, repairing what was coming apart, and 14 months of learning, slowly, that the hands I had were still enough. We stood near the side door of Calvary Baptist for 20 minutes after the service. The congregation moved around us the way water moves around something fixed, acknowledging us without requiring anything from us. Arvella stood across from me, and I stood across from her, and we said true things, not warm things. True things. There is a difference. She did not ask for forgiveness. I did not offer absolution. What we exchanged was something more durable than either, an accounting. What Darius had built. How long it took her to see it. What it costs a woman to put her name on something she did not fully understand. I told her that trust was not a thing I could give her in a parking lot or a church doorway. That it was built the same way everything worth having is built. Slowly, with evidence, over time. She said she understood. I believe she meant it. Whether meaning it and doing it turn out to be the same thing, that is what the next months will show. The conversation is not resolved, but it is ours now. That is more than it was. Lenora had called the week before. Everything was secured. The trust, the documents, the property, all filed, all on record, all in my name. The bad faith finding was permanent. The cost award had been processed. She said the word done the same way she said everything, precisely, without ceremony. I appreciated that. Dr. Caldwell's final notation had been submitted as part of the hearing documentation and filed in my medical record. I had read it once. Patient demonstrates full decision-making capacity. Prognosis positive. No clinical basis for guardianship or conservatorship. Case closed. 15 words. Everything Darius spent 14 months trying to bury. Confirmed in 15 words by the man who had been in that backyard and stood up anyway. The contractor called back Thursday. The floors were salvageable. The wiring would need updating. Not cheap, but not impossible. 4 months of work if I decided to move forward. He said he could hold the estimate for 30 days. I told him I would be in touch. I had not decided. I was still in the space between reclaiming what was mine and imagining what might come next. That space felt new. It felt like something I had earned the right to stand in without hurrying. Luvinia was coming for dinner at 6. Sweet potato pie. She would talk too much about everything and nothing, and I would not ask her to stop. I reached into the basket beside my chair and took out a needle and a piece of fabric, a hem that had been sitting unfinished for longer than I wanted to count. Small work, honest work, the kind my hands knew before they knew anything else. I did not think about the reunion. I did not think about the courtroom or the parking lot or the expression on Darius's face when he got in his car and drove away from something he could not take from me. I threaded the needle on the second try. Then I began. I spent 30 years fixing what other people tore. Took me 14 months to remember I could fix this too.